The first thing you need to know is that the hotel ballroom smelled like limes and starch that evening, the AC grumbling against Karachi's humid October, and I was standing at the lectern beneath a screen that still read Celebration of Life Draft. Despite the final files on my flash drive being named and timestamped to the minute, I had come to finalize the layout for my own funeral service, a decision that never fails to give people pause until they understand it. Was a logistical rehearsal for a terminal diagnosis that had, by stubborn grace, reversed last month. And I kept the event because the deposit couldn't be recovered without a fight. I was already in the mood to win. The ballroom lights were dimmed to a practical brightness, and I traced the aisle line with my toe, marking the distance between floral stands that would now be replaced with a modest photo wall of family elders. My cousins had insisted on coming to help, which I took exactly the way it was offered, a test to see whether I'd embarrass myself in public with a morbid Vanity Fair. I'd booked the date months ago, then repurposed it into a memorial for my mother, who had passed years earlier with no ceremony because the estate wars began the very hour the doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration a tight, insectoid rattle against my ribs. And I ignored it because the screen showed a teal check mark, the bank's fraud department confirming a freeze code on the legacy account. My aunt had siphoned from 4 household contingencies. The air smelled faintly of polish and old roses. Below it, the faint oil of the kitchen drifted when staff opened the service doors. I'd asked for the projector to be tested with audio, since we had voice notes from my mother that my lawyer said would be useful to play at some point. For reasons that were not sentimental, when the doors opened and my cousins glided in Nabal in a navy kurta that fit like a borrowed compliment, Sana with her pearls for daytime drama, and Amina carrying a tote the size of a small country. The first thing they did was look up at the Celebration of Life Draft's slide and laugh. Not a belly laugh. That would have been honest. The brittle, ringy laugh that bounces off walls and marks territory without scuffing shoes. "Oh, you're still doing this?" Sana said. Hand 2 pearls. Voice pitched for the staff to hear. "We thought the miracle cure came with a refund." My hand stayed on the lectern because I knew that particular show, their mockery, which was always public first so that any response from me could be framed as hysteria later. The deposit was non-refundable. I said, calm. I repurposed the date for a memorial for Amy. You're listed as speakers. 2 minutes each, written remarks required. Submit to the hotel manager for tech cues. Amina set her tote on the head table and slid out a stack of glossy cards like they were tarot. "Remind me," she said, voice loud enough to flutter napkins. "Do we eulogize you or your money?" Laughter again, crisp as the linen. The AC sighed. Someone in the staff corridor muttered about the HDMI cable. I glanced at the ceiling speakers and then at the door because I was waiting for 2 other people, the manager, Farouk, and my attorney, Rita, who had told me to keep things so conspicuously procedural that their script would curdle under its own theatrics. They circled me like I was a soft opening. "We saw the new invitation," Nabal said, tapping his phone. "Very Usilver, restrained, ticketed." "Wait, ticketed? Since when does grief require QR codes?" He held up his screen where my invite sent last night sat crisp as a dental bill. "Memorial for Shanaz Begum, October 18th, Pearl Palace. Telentry by RSVP QR for security." I could smell his aftershave, too sweet for evening. And beneath it, the faint temps of sanitizer from the staff cart someone had left parked too close. "Since certain attendees cost venues money," I said, and before he could tilt his head at me, Farouk stepped in carrying a binder. He had the gait of a man who had learned to look unhurried while sprinting mentally. "Apologies," he said. Soundcheck took a moment. "We're good on playback. Ms. Rita is parking." He nodded at the cousins, then at me. Then at the binder where last-minute printouts were clipped. Event plan, revised seating chart, compliance notes. Sana reached for the binder like it was hers. Farouk kept it in his hands with an effortless micro-withdrawal that made her smile stiffen. "There's been a small change," he said, addressing me but placing his words where the room could hear. "Security informed me we had some early arrivals attempting to access the staff areas. We've added a badge check for anyone who needs to be backstage." He set the binder on the lectern edge, the metal of the clip cool against my knuckles. In the corner of the first page was a small sticky tab I'd asked him to place, V. The letter mattered. I'd planted it as a loop. A contact in my phone saved simply as V, whose real name would land like a stamp later. For now, I needed the cousins to perform exactly as they always did, but with witnesses who were trained to notice compliance breaches. A scent of cold citrus trickled from the water jugs. Through the wall, a muffled laugh from the kitchen rose and fell like steam. Light pooled on the lacquered dance floor and slid away at the edges where it met carpet worn by brides and barat bands. Nabil pushed past me to the mic. He tapped it. "Is this on? Ladies and gentlemen, the funeral that wasn't. Or is it a fundraiser? Do QR codes lead to the will?" The joke was flat. It didn't matter. He wanted the sound of his voice inside the hotel systems. People recorded everything now, and if not people, then cameras. A soft click from the far corner told me Farouk's team had started the recording. Good. I needed the full thing, the lines, the tones, the interference attempt. "Don't," I said, and my voice was steady enough to hold a tray. "You're not authorized to handle event equipment." Santa rolled her eyes. Amina smirked into her tote like it was a mirror. "You sent us an invite to your own farewell," she said. "We are SVPED for the roast." The AC kicked louder, a breath drawn on the hotel's behalf. Above us, the chandelier glass tinkled faintly when the air shifted. I thought of my mother's hands tying jasmine strings and of the last voice note she sent me, where she said my full name. The long version, like a legal signature. Footsteps. Then the door eased open, and Rita entered with a messenger bag that had a habit of containing hammers disguised as documents. She smelled of rain despite the dry night, a note of petrichor from the Perking Garden sprinklers. "I'm only here because you said there might be signatures," she said to me, but she stood where the cousins could see the steel in her spine. Her haircut made people underestimate her age. Her binder tabs made people confess. "Perfect timing," I said. "We're discussing the program. 2 minutes each. And the RSVP QR is not a revenue tool. It's a boundary." Amina laughed again, softer. "Boundaries," she said, rolling the syllables like coins. From the cousin who kept the key to Neno's locker and forgot the combination. She didn't know I'd recovered it months ago. She didn't know I'd had the bank logs certified and time-stamped. She didn't know the audit trail was a net that didn't just catch. It weighed. I reached for the binder and slid out the seating chart. The blue pen lines looked surgical. "You're at the family table by the aisle," I said. "I moved you from the head table for a reason." Rida leaned against a chair back, crossed her ankles. "We can do this the noisy way or the notarized way," she murmured. Sana swung her pearls in a small, annoyed arc that flashed in the light like a metronome for impatience. "She still thinks I'm after her money," she stage whispered to Amina, as if grief comes with a credit line. "Seems I'm not family." I said it quietly, not as a plea but as a filing note. The phrase the exact length of a receipt when folded and slid into an envelope. They heard it anyway. The mockery paused, not to apologize, but to recalc. Only people who crave status panic when someone declines the premise of their pecking order. A trolley squeaked in, laden with tea and small plates of shortbread, lemon sugar dusted on top. The steam curled thin and milky. Farouk nodded at me, an almost invisible signal that the second open loop was in place. The camera angle on the far wall had been adjusted to include the lectern, the cousins, and the seating map. "Let's review the program," I said. "Welcome, reflection, 3 remarks, audio montage, closing. There will be ushers at the side doors. Guests will exit that way so they pass the charitable pledge table on their way out." Amina blinked. "Charitable what?" I slid a sheet from the binder. "The Shahnaz Begum Foundation," I said. "Registered last week, filings executed and recorded with the provincial registrar. Memorandum and articles notarized." Initial gift: the funds from the disputed account ending in 7,741. Once they're transferred back and certified, we'll announce the pledge amounts at the conclusion of the program. Silence, and then Nabal snorted. What funds? He tried to play dumb the way children tried to hide fireworks behind their backs while sparks drift up. Rita untangled a set of documents and laid them on the head table like a magician who doesn't need misdirection. Those funds, she said, tapping the bank statement with redacted addresses but clear ledger lines. Wire confirmations. Reversal emails. A sworn affidavit by the bank manager, witnessed and countersigned. And because I know you like drama, she added, softer, an audio recording of the meeting where you suggested reimbursing yourself for your care work by dipping into the account without the executor's knowledge. The hum of the AC smoothed into a lower note, like a room holding its breath. Santa swallowed, the pearl string quieting. You bugged me, she said, but the tone was wrong. It wasn't outraged, it was worried. You were in a recorded premises, Rita said, and you consented to recording by entering. Public places have cameras. Staff rooms have signage. The hotel's compliance officer will confirm. The side door opened as if on cue. And a woman with a crisp bun and an ID on a retractable cord stepped in, nodded at Farouk, then at me. Leela, I said, because names are anchors. Thanks for joining. She gave me that unruffled smile of people who spend their lives redirecting stormwater. We have active recording in all event spaces, she said. Notice posted at the loading entrance and backstage. We also log access to VRAX. Access was attempted. She let that hang. Nabil shrugged, like it didn't matter which cupboard his hand had been caught in. I was testing audio levels, he said, and the lie chipped a tooth on the edge of the truth. Rita slid a thumb drive across the head table toward Farouk. He plugged it into the rack. The screen flashed from draft to a black title card with a date and time in the corner, white numbers neat as a police report. The audio swelled. My mother's voice notes threaded with her handwriting as photos scrolled. But then, deftly, the montage cut to a clipped conversation, the bank's reception area. The cousins discussing contingencies. The words no one will know, like a fingerprint. Sanaz's hand went to her pearls again, as if checking for a pulse. Amina reached for her tote and then stopped. Aware that reaching for a bag when people are talking about money is a bad stage choice. Leela, the compliance officer, lifted a clipboard. We received a complaint of tampering last week, she said. Someone attempted to redirect the RSVP QR code to a personal Google form. The attempt was reversed and the logs retained. The incident has been escalated and cited in our incident report. Our manager is enjoined to keep the logs on file for 90 days. Nabal blinked, recalculated his angle, and tried the charm route. This is too much, he said. Smile turned to low beam. We're family. We tease because we love. Our cousin is alive. That's the headline. She turned her own funeral into a fundraiser. Didn't we all agree that's, he looked for a word, economical, opportunistic, efficient. Efficient would have been telling me you had already withdrawn RS1, 7 million. From the legacy account under the pretense of paying for repairs to Nano's old apartment, which was sold 2 years ago and whose repairs were already covered by insurance, I said. I kept my voice unraised, my hands open on the lectern. The light off the chandelier threw tiny stars on the tablecloth, and the lemon sugar on the shortbread shone like frost. Instead, you mocked the invitation and tried to redirect the guest list to yourselves. Farouk clasped his hands at his waist. He was a man who used posture as punctuation. I'm going to be very plain, he said, with the tone of a manager who has long stopped swinging at flies. You are welcome as guests under the terms posted on the invitation. You are not authorized to access our systems or interfere with our staff. You are not co-hosts, and you do not manage our AV equipment. You will be seated where requested, and your remarks must be submitted for timing. If that's unacceptable, we'll arrange for your graceful exit. Amina laughed again, but now it sounded like a cough. This is an ambush, she said, not to Farouk, but to the invisible jury she was always addressing. Rida picked up a page and slid it across to me with a fingertip. Incident reports were filed with the hotel. Notices were served to the bank yesterday. An audit has been scheduled. The will has been lodged with the court and certified. The trust document will be recorded on Monday. And because I don't like surprises, she added. We've also executed a partnership deed for the foundation with a charity board. You cannot sit on because you do not meet the governance requirements. The one-line punch landed. The air felt cooler. Or maybe that was the way clarity chills a room. I am not someone who likes to scandalize. I am someone who likes things to be documented, time-stamped, and witnessed. Because memory is a poor court stenographer under pressure. When I fell sick and thought I had days, I wrote everything down as if the ink itself could notarize existence. When I lived, I kept writing. My mother would have laughed at the QR codes, but she would have loved the way Layla said and joined like a blessing. We walked through the program. They tried to interrupt. I let Farouk handle the staging because that is what allies are for. You build a team that tilts the room back to level when people pull at the corners. He talked about the run-of show, like a train schedule. Cues executed at minute marks. Remarks timed. Mics cut if necessary. He told them our ushers were trained to de-escalate. He told them their seats were near an aisle for visibility and ease of exit. He did not smile. He did not apologize. When they balked at the pledge table, I unfolded the foundation documents and laid them out like a meal. The memorandum. The articles. The initial board. Me. My mother's friend Yasmin, a retired school principal with a spine like a steel ruler. Farouk in a non-voting capacity as the venue's liaison for the inaugural event. And V still saved as V, the open loop hanging like a lantern. The articles cited clear donor governance, audit rights, and enforcement principles. The clauses sang with verbs. Recorded, transferred, audited, certified, indemnified. Amina tried a new script. So you're commandeering grief, she said, chin-tipped. You're creating a stage to humiliate us. Rita didn't even blink. We're creating a stage to memorialize a woman who taught children to read without humiliating them, she said. The humiliation, if you feel it, is the private kind that happens when you tell the truth to a room. The lemony clean of the space pressed down. The AC kicked, paused, kicked again. The chandelier shivered. Then came the micro-mystery I had planted without telling even Rida the envelope. It had sat quietly at the bottom of my bag for 3 years. A thick, plain thing with my name in my mother's angular script, sealed and stamped by a notary at her insistence. I set it on the lectern and slid a finger along the edge, hearing the paper fibers give with a soft complaint. The smell of ink and paper lifted up, dry and slightly metallic, like old coins. Sana said, "What now?" like she'd found a hair in her soup. I pulled out a single page first, a letter, then a second sheet. The schedule of disbursements from an educational trust my mother had set up quietly after she sold her jewelry. Funds that trickled out each year to cousins' kids' tuition, to my grandfather's medical bills, to mosque repairs, all recorded and redacted to protect minor recipients' privacy. I didn't share this during the fighting, I said. It would have been used like a stick. But I'm sharing it now because the foundation is an evolution of my mother's work, not a weapon against you. Nabal's face did a very small thing, the way a window shade shifts a millimeter in a cross breeze. She never told us, he said. She wasn't a woman who announced what she had done while doing it, I said. She believed in receipts, not applause. The letter's ink had bled a little at one edge from a droplet of something tea. Perhaps, or a tear that refused to be dramatic, only saline. I folded the page and placed it beside the lectern like a shrine that didn't seek worship. We took a short break. The staff poured tea. The short bread plates moved along the head table like slow ships. The cousins huddled near the aisle, talking in low voices. Rida stood off to the side and texted, her thumb strokes quick. Then she showed me her phone. The bank manager confirming the freeze code had been executed at 19:05, a minute before we started, and that reversal letters had been accepted and countersigned. The smell of fresh mint drifted from the glass water dispensers someone had infused last minute. The air cooled. The light warmed with the timing settings on the dimmers. Level set. Farouk asked me. Soft. Level set, I said. Let's rehearse entry with ushers. He called them over. 2 young men in black suit students from a hospitality school the hotel partnered with listened closely. I gave them a script for if someone tried to redirect guests to the side entrance. Ma'am, the main door is to your left. I gave them a script for if someone demanded a head table seat, we'll happily check with the event owner. I gave them a script for if someone tried to take the mic, the program will resume as scheduled. We reset the screen. I had Farouk run the tribute again from a different angle, checking that the speakers didn't clip. The audio was clean. My mother's laugh as she corrected my Urdu grammar. The faint clink of a teacup she set down too hard when I teased her about saving sugar rations from the 80s. The blessing she whispered over my name when she thought. I had left the room. I watched the cousins watching the video and did not add commentary. Sometimes you let a room learn its own acoustics. Sana asked to see the program script. I handed her a printed copy. She flipped to the end, looking for her name. 2 minutes, she said, making a face like a critic about to write a fair but wounding review. 2 minutes, I said. You can do anything with 2 minutes, even apologize. She looked back up sharply. Will that be recorded? Everything tonight is recorded, Layla said, eyes on her clipboard. That protects all parties. Nabil said nothing. Amina checked her phone and made a face. Rita watched them like you watch a chessboard right after you move a knight to where it looks decorative but is not. We began. Guests arrived in small clusters, dresses the color of ripe fruit, suits that had survived a handful of weddings and still believed. The QR check at the door created small polite jams followed by relief. People liked the feeling of being expected and accounted for. Farouk walked the line at the entrance, smoothing frictions with a hand-on-chest apology and a gesture to the tea set near the foyer. The urge to gossip died under the lamplight like moths that realize the flame is not, in fact, a good friend. I opened the program with a short welcome that tasted like mint from the water, but was otherwise procedural. Thank you for coming, I said. Please check your phones are on silent. If you need to step out to the washrooms, our ushers will guide you back to your seats. We will keep this to exactly 50 minutes. You make people trust a program by being cruel to time. The sound tech in the back, a thin man in a hoodie, gave me a small thumbs up. The montage played. A few guests dabbed their eyes. The light made halos on the plastic of the chairs. The AC moaned and then found its groove. The first speaker, my mother's colleague from the school, spoke for 90 seconds about her insistence on lesson plans and mangoes. The second, Yasmin, read from a notebook with a plastic cover that had known kitchen counters and the underside of handbags. The third was Sana. She walked up with a swan neck and a paper flutter that said she had prepared nothing. She did what I expected. Thanked herself for being the strong set of shoulders during my illness. Mentioned a legacy account in a tone that implied she had been its steward against vultures. And closed with a line about family being complicated but precious. It was a speech that had been run through a spin cycle. The room listened politely. I watched micro-expressions, a teacher frown, a neighbor tilt her head. Farouk's eyes move the way a metronome ticks when someone rushes ahead of the beat. When she finished, I let the applause be gentle. Then I asked if there were any practical announcements before we continued. Leela, compliance voice ready, stepped to the side mic. A gentle reminder, she said, to keep your badges visible if you need to access the foyer during the program. And if anyone finds a misplaced envelope with a blue stamp, please bring it to the front. It belongs to our host. She had not lost it. She was paying off a loop. People glanced at the lectern, where the envelope sat like a white, patient bird. I moved to the center. Before we close, I said, a brief housekeeping matter. The AC whispered. The projector fanward. I picked up the handheld mic, liking the weight of it, the way it felt like a tool and not a weapon. The slide changed on the screen to a concise table. Legacy account ending 7,741 status. Frozen pending reversal. Foundation pledgers 17M. Board listed. Audit scheduled. Rita had insisted on the typography. Unglamorous fonts that people trust. Someone in the back coughed. The lemon from the shortbread still held in the air. Some of you know, I said, that my mother's passing was overshadowed by administrative disputes. Tonight, we are not here to adjudicate grief. We are here to redirect it into work. I am announcing the formation of the Shanaz Begum Foundation, which will fund literacy grants for girls in Karanji and Baldia. The initial pledge will come from the reversal of unauthorized withdrawals from the legacy account. To be recorded and transferred upon certification, I let the verbs do their work. Sana shifted, her chair catching on carpet. Amina had stopped hiding behind the tote and was now holding it like a shield. Nabal looked at the screen like a man who does not like tables because they have lines that constrain narrative. He called out then, less loud than I had expected, but sharp, the voice of a cousin who needed an audience. "You can't accuse us publicly," he said. "This is defamation." Rita turned her head slightly, the way a doctor looks at a rash and identifies the plant. "Facts that can be substantiated are not defamatory," she said. "And to the extent they are disputed, the forum is not this room. It is the court where filings have been lodged and notices served." They stood. This is where they always stood, because standing is status and motion is misdirection. Sanaa's voice tried to sweeten. "We just want to talk as a family," she said, like the CCTV camera did not exist. Like the QR system hadn't been attacked by a URL shortener in someone's browser history. Like Leela's pen wasn't poised above a form with the word incident in bold. A guest in the second row murmured something to her neighbor, whose hand was on a cane, the varnish on its handle warm from use. I raised the mic a centimeter so the sound tech could ride the fader. "I've heard as a family used as a rug," I said. "Under it, you sweep the parts of the story that aren't flattering." I'm not sweeping. We're not arguing tonight. We're codifying. We're recording. We're transferring. We're building. A breeze from a door opening let in night jasmine from the hotel garden. The smell laid like a cool cloth across the room's cheeks. At that moment, the hotel's general manager, whom I had not planned to involve publicly, chose to enter. He must have been watching from the corridor because his timing was a stamp. "If I may," he said, and the room's head shifted toward him like a school of fish toward light. He introduced himself, nodded at Farouk, acknowledged Layla, then faced the cousins. "You are welcome to remain," he said, "if you comply with our event protocol. You are not permitted to harass the host or attempt to alter our systems. Earlier, you mocked the invitation at the entrance and attempted to direct arriving guests to a separate list. That is not acceptable. We have recorded the interference and will escort you out if it continues." The cousins needed a new mask. Amina reached for anger and found it too expensive. Sana reached for tears and remembered her mascara. Nabil reached for legalese and found he did not know the words. "This is our condon," he said weakly. "Who are you to tell us where to sit?" The general manager's answer was composed with the kind of dignity that does not speak unless there are receipts. "I am the person responsible for this house and everyone in it," he said. "And tonight this house sides with the person who booked it, paid it, and complied with its rules. You will find your assigned seats." There was something like a small sound from the second row, like a bird landing. It was Yasmin, my mother's friend, nodding without surprise. People read fairness, like weather. The room's temperature changed, not literally, though the AC chose that moment to take a breath, but emotionally. Guests who had been frozen between pity and curiosity thawed into solidarity. Backs straightened. Eyes stopped flickering to the door. The room resized. That is the only way to describe it. The walls did not move, but the moral dimensions did. "Seems I'm not family," I said again, not softly this time, but with a different load. The words stepping forward and setting down their bags. It wasn't self-style. It was category correction. A guest in the back clapped once, then more hands, then a wash of applause that wasn't loud so much as crisp with relief. The general manager stepped aside. Farouk reset the mic, and Rita exhaled like a person who knows the next scene is paperwork. The cousins sat, not gracefully, small clatter of chair legs against the floor that sounded like a cluster of dropped excuses. We concluded the program in 7 minutes. The pledge table filled with names at a slow, steady rate. No grandstanders, just signatures and blue ink that would later be scanned and recorded. Leela logged the badge reports and printed copies for me, initialed them and slipped them into a clear sleeve. Farouk walked me through the incident form fields, pointing with a capped pen. Time, location, description, corrective action. We complied with ourselves. After the formal closing, several neighbors came up, not to whisper gossip, but to ask for a foundation brochure. We did not have brochures. We had a simple one-pager with a QR that led not to a personal form but to a treasurer's page, showing pledge totals and schedules. The smell of jasmine from the garden sharpened as the doors opened. The ballroom lighting slid into its evening setting, warmer and lower. And I saw the room like the day after a storm, clear, washed, not quiet exactly, but orderly. When most guests had left, Rita and I sat at the head table while the staff cleared. She rubbed the bridge of her nose and laughed, a soft sound that never grew teeth. "You kept it all inside the ropes," she said. "Process, receipts, compliance, no shouting." I tipped my glass of water toward her like a toast. The glass left a ring on the cloth, then started to evaporate. I promised myself, I said, somewhere in the middle of my diagnosis, somewhere in the middle of counting out pills in a plastic tray, that next time they tried to set the stage, I'd bring my own lighting. We went through the aftermath protocols, because that is how you make a public moment become a durable fact. Farouk brought out the AV logs. He reviewed them and certified their accuracy. He countersigned the rehearsal report and stamped it with the hotel's date seal, ink a blue the color of municipal swimming pools. Rita drafted a brief memo to accompany the bank's reversal confirmation, attaching the pledge table's closing number. Layla forwarded the incident report to the compliance inbox and CC'd me. The subject line was precise and emotionless. Event interference, attempted access, and QR redirection action taken. The cousins waited near the side exit, debating whether to try one last scene. I saw it in their shoulders, the way Sana kept adjusting her shawl, making and remaking the same fold. The way Amina stood with one foot half turned out, a dancer considering the next beat. The way Nabal scrolled his phone in an angry spiral that would hide later under the word busy. I did not go to them. You do not negotiate with people whose leverage depends on proximity to your heart. Instead, I found Yasmin. She had been my mother's co-conspirator in kindness and in 1,000 tiny rebellions against bureaucratic inertia. She pressed a small square into my hand. A Polaroid of Amy in her kitchen, flower on her cheek, eyes mid-laugh. The texture of the photo was plasticky and familiar. The smell was a faint chemical whisper that lodged behind the nose. "Keep working," she said. "Don't work angry." I put the Polaroid in my wallet behind my ID like a private authorization stamp. We handed over the envelope to Farouk for safekeeping overnight. Witnessed. Recorded in the hotel's custody log with an entry number that would mean something if it needed to. I updated the foundation's ledger on my tablet while Rita scanned in the pledge sheet with a portable scanner that sounded like someone sipping at a straw. We timestamped everything. We used boring file names, so we saved 2 locations, one of them offline. Boredom is a security protocol. In the parking lot, the air lost its lemon clean and replaced it with the smell of dust and petrol. The night breeze lifted the edges of the posters still taped in the foyer. My mother's name. My number for inquiries, the gentle ask for donations. An usher, done for the evening, waved and then hesitated. "Madame," he said. "Shy, my sister teaches in Orangi town. May I send her the link? She has girls who—" His voice trailed off because askers worry they're asking too much. "Yes," I said, and gave him a second link. An interest form for teacher microgrants we had not announced because nothing was ready yet except our conviction. A car idled near the side of the lot. The cousins inside, presumably, headlights off, waiting for me to walk past so they could manufacture a scene they would call a private conversation. I took another route, the long way, under a string of garden lights that smelled like warmed plastic and release. Rita fell into step, her bag bumping her hip like a sleepy cat. "You'll get messages," she said. "Tonight, tomorrow, after that, I'll answer with documents," I said. At home, the apartment felt like the inside of a shell, curved, cool. A little echoing since I'd moved furniture to make room for visitors the next day. I'd put the Polaroid on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a chili. I set my shoes carefully on the rack so the heels didn't nick the wood. I boiled water for tea and let it sit off the boil for a minute before pouring it over leaves because scalding ruins the silk of flavor. Process is love in slow close. When the messages came, I triaged. Apologies got a form reply. "Thank you for your note. We appreciate your presence and will keep you updated as the Foundation's audit concludes." Threats got no reply. And a screenshot saved to the incident folder with a file name that began with the date. Demands for private conversation got, "Please direct any concerns to Rita at address." Oh, a neighbor's kind paragraph got a thank you, plus a request to recommend a teacher for the first microgrant. I did not explain myself because explanation is a currency only some people accept. I issued receipts. The next morning, a letter from the bank arrived by courier. The envelope was smooth and thick. The flap glue peeled with a whisper. Inside, a formal acknowledgement. Reversal executed funds frozen pending transfer to the executor account. The letterhead smelled faintly of the bank's lobby. Or maybe I imagined it. A scent of polished floors and suited air. The courier had me sign with a black gel pen that left a slight ridge. I handed him a bottle of water on his way out because kindness is also a protocol. I filed the letter in the Foundation folder, scanned it, and sent a copy to Rita with the subject line we had agreed on. Short, unpoetic, inevitable. The day moved like a train on a timetable. Calls to the registrar to confirm the deed had been. Recorded a visit to the notary to certify the copies. An email to Farouk thanking him with an attached tip sheet for future events where families might turn into knives. He replied with a line that made me smile. "We will update our training to include QR redirection attempts. Thank you for the pattern." By afternoon, the cousins had already begun their next phase, a WhatsApp family group thread where tone sloshed between sanctimony and grievance. I read each message only long enough to triage content. "You humiliated us in public," Sana wrote. "You would have humiliated me in private." I did not reply. "You're weaponizing compliance," Amina wrote. No, I thought, I am giving compliance back its original dignity. Nabil sent a screenshot of an article about defamation and family disputes, which he had not read past the headline. Rita, CCD, wrote to the group with the text of a professional who has prepared for 14 steps and will not skip any. "Any concerns should be addressed through the appropriate legal channels," she wrote. "Please direct correspondence to my office." For purposes of clarity, the event held at Pearl Palace on October 18th followed hotel policy and the posted invitations conditions. A copy of the incident report is attached. The group quieted, then metallic chatter, then quiet again. The quiet that comes when you send a stamped envelope. I took the Polaroid off the fridge and looked at my mother's laugh lines like they were ledger marks. I thought of the invitation, mocked at the door like a vanity. And how the hotel manager's spine stayed straight in public, because spines learn from other spines. I took my laptop to the balcony, where the city at dusk smelled like fried onions and engine heat, and wrote the Foundation's first grant guideline in language so plain no one could insert mischief into it. Eligibility. Teachers in government schools within District East. Purpose: literacy materials. Reporting: 2 photos. And a 5-line summary. Disbursement: executed after verification call. The days that followed were not cinematic. They were administrative, which is how justice creeps in and stays. Certified, recorded, filed, witnessed, countersigned. The cousins tried to stage a smaller scene at the registrar's office. The Clerk, bored and kind, asked for their ID copies and then asked them to sit down or leave. They left. The bank manager, the one who had signed the affidavit, called to confirm the schedule of transfers. His voice carried the weighted calm of a person who has decided to be proud of his name on paper. The hotel sent me a thank you voucher. I donated it to a school prize day. I received 3 days later a message from V. It was a simple text with a time and an address and the letter V, like a wax seal. V was not a spy. V was my mother's former student, now the head of a small nonprofit that ran reading rooms in catchy bodies. We met in a library room that smelled like books that had been touched, a smell like paper warmed by hands. V had the alert eyes of a person who notices what is missing from a room. "We'll partner," she said, "but only if you promise to be boring." "I'm the least exciting person you'll meet," I said. And we laughed because it was true in the way that becomes a superpower. We drew up a partnership memo on a single page: responsibilities, reporting cadence, disbursement triggers. We signed it, witnessed by a librarian who did not realize she was notarizing a quiet treaty against spite. We shook hands. Her grip was firm, the skin warm, the bones slender and decisive. Another loop paid off, not with fanfare, but with a filing. In the weeks that followed, the ripples rolled outward as if the ballroom scene had been a stone that landed exactly where it needed to. A donor who had fallen away during the family wars wrote to say she'd like to fund 10 reading kits and asked for a receipt with an official stamp that had weight. We bought stamps. We bought a locking file cabinet. We bought a thermal label printer that sounded like a cicada and made me unreasonably happy. Good sound, reliable. The cousins tried to bring a case, then withdrew it when Rita filed a motion to dismiss with attachments that read like a saga of gentle refusals to be bullied. They floated rumors to the aunties the currency of the board, but the room had resized and no one wanted to go back to breathing old air. They were not ostracized. That would have been theatrical. They were recalibrated. People who once treated them like weather now treated them like a forecast. Informative, sometimes wrong. Always secondary to the fact that you can carry an umbrella. Farouk updated the hotel's event policy to require a named compliance liaison for any private event where money might be discussed. Evan birthdays turn into board meetings in our families. Leela led a training where she said the word redirection 3 times, like a spell against weak links. The ushers got a letter of commendation for following scripts and not improvising heroics. The sound tech put a label on the rack that read, "If you touch this without asking, the sound will get worse for everyone." He had learned the plain language function of deterrence. I poured tea at my mother's photo wall on the day we would have celebrated her birthday. The jasmine looped over frames. The air smelled like milk powder and cardamom. I put a plate of shortbread beneath the photo without believing she would eat it. It was a ritual for me, not for ghosts. I texted via photo of the first 3 reading kits assembled, each stamped with a small blue logo we'd designed to be unremarkable. Rita replied to my email about the trust recording with a simple done and a PDF that chimed like a bell when it opened. I met Layla for coffee at the hotel one afternoon. Not for business, but because allies can also be friends if you keep the ledger clean. We sat under a fan that clicked once every revolution. The click a reminder that perfection is not useful. "I left a copy of the incident report in our training deck," she said. "We redacted names. But we kept your line." "Which line?" I asked, stirring sugar into my tea that I would not drink because I like rituals more than I like sweet. "The family line," she said. "It helps new staff remember that their loyalty is to the room, not to the loudest person in it." I thought about that. Loyalty to the room. Not to the host, not to the guests, not to the cousins who believed blood was a lifetime pass. To the room where rules were posted and followed, where compliance wasn't a cudgel, but a commons. I had known it that night in the ballroom when the manager laid the line down like a clean ribbon and the cousins realized their wingtips didn't permit them to step over it. "Seems I'm not family," I said now. Not as a wound, but as a category. Lila raised her cup. "Good," she said. "Rooms need members, not monarchs." Months later, at the Foundation's first micro-grant ceremony, 10 teachers. 10 envelopes that smelled faintly of glue and optimism. We used a smaller room at the hotel. Not the ballroom, but the same staff. The ushers were older now by months, and a few more incidents. The sound tech had replaced the label with a better one. Farouk had moved to a regional role, but returned for the day to hand out certificates, his tie the same shade of patient navy. We read out the names. We shook hands. We took photos against a banner printed on vinyl that reflected flash like a cheap aurora. Afterward, the cousins came. Of course they came. Not to give, but to be seen deciding whether to give. They stood by the door, not the entrance, an old habit. They liked side doors for their metaphor. Sena wore her pearls. Amina carried a tote. Nabil's aftershave had matured. I nodded at them the way you nod at acquaintances whose names you never learned properly. Sena stepped forward. "We want to pledge," she said, eyes briefly flicking to the cameras like birds to crumbs. "We want to do it. Publicly. Submit the pledge form." I said, "There's a QR code on the program." Her mouth tightened like a threaded cap that didn't want to open. "We were hoping to announce it now. The announcements will happen during the financial review," I said. "After funds are received and recorded, it's less cinematic." Amina laughed, this time without meanness, or maybe just without fuel. "You never do give us a stage," she said. "You can have seats," I said. "You can have forms. You can have audits." They did not like it, but they did not leave. They filled the forms. They made small pledges. They transferred the funds quickly because Rita had built a penalty clause into the pledge terms for delayed payment. Us. And for all their taste for drama, they hated late fees. We recorded the receipts. We sent thank you notes that were completely vanilla. We did not post their faces on the Foundation's page because we did not post anyone's faces without permission. We posted numbers and book lists and a photo of a stack of Urdu readers bound in twine that smelled like hemp and chalk. I wish I could say the cousins transformed into donors or disappeared into rivers. They did not. They recalibrated to the room's new shape. They told the story to themselves in a way that made them look better. They avoided side doors for a while, then drifted back to them. They stopped mocking the invitation to my funeral because mockery no longer paid. They learned painfully and late that when a manager sides with the person who reads the terms become a wall. You can't negotiate with a pout. What I learned was smaller and more durable. That dignity is a system you can practice, that you can file, serve, execute, notarize, and record your boundaries without breaking anyone's voice, least of all your own. That family becomes the wrong-sized word when it's used to bully the room. That what saves you in the ballroom is the same thing that helps a teacher in a Ranji town make a class roster. A pen, a line, a place to sign, a witness. When nights are thick and my energy low, put on the hotel recording and let the sound of the AC and China and my mother's quiet laugh work like cool hands on my brow. I watch the moment when the manager speaks and the room resizes. I breathe in the lemony air of a place that chose rules over noise. I make tea and write 2 more grant guidelines and update the ledger with amounts that look small to people who see only galas but look large to people who know the price of exercise books. I place the Polaroid back on the fridge when it falls and replace the magnet with one that holds better. Sometimes I walk past Pearl Palace at night and the garden smells a little like jasmine and a little like detergent. And I remember the binders and the faders and the way we gently moved chairs that evening like we were retiling a floor. Inside, strangers applaud strangers, not for being right, but for being organized. Outside, the guards lean on their batons and talk about cricket. I look at the doors and think, those are good doors. They open, they close. They let people in who came to do the work and keep out people who came to be the work. In the end, that's what the invitation was about. The one they mocked, not a performance, but a plan. Not grief as a spectacle, but grief as a ledger that becomes a library. I keep 1 copy of it in a drawer, the paper slightly wrinkled from the night I folded and unfolded it. It reads, Memorial for Shahnaz Begum Entry by RSVP QR for Security. It could also read entry by respect, entry by receipts. When I touch it, I can still feel the crispness of Farouk's stamp through the paper. A small embossed circle like a moon pressed into a sky of text. If you've ever had someone laugh at the door to your own room and try to set your program for you, write the program anyway. File it, serve it, execute it, notarize it, record it. Build a room that sides with dignity. Then invite the people who know how to sit, listen, stand, and work. If this story helped you see a way through your own public mess, share it with someone who needs the calm, procedural version of courage. And if you want more justice stories built on receipts, not rage, follow along and invite a friend.